Welcome back to Benefits of Bipolar. Lee from Ellie here. I think I've forgotten to say my name once or twice when I do that, but I don't really know what I'm doing, which is completely different from the person I have today. Paris over here, who's been doing this for how long ago did you start your podcast?
Almost 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Okay, so somebody who's way more experienced than me. Go listen to her podcast. It's going to be much better produced, a better introduction, seamless as everything. I've heard, parts of it, and she's so good going back and forth with her guests. Knows when to jump in and when not to. She's extremely experienced at that. So, thank you for coming on, Paris. You want to introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll kind of get jumped in.
Lee, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and talk with you. I know we've been connected on Instagram for a while, going back and forth, messaging each other. And yes, just to kick things off, a little bit of background on me. My name is Paris Scobie. I was formerly Prinkevich. I got married this year in March. So it's been a pretty busy year.
Thank you for
Got married in
saying.
March.
I was a little confused there, especially by the latter one. So I didn't want to try either one or try to.
No, it's fun. I love that you did that because so many people always ask me, they're like, how do you say your name? And I'm like, I'm like, don't feel bad about it if you can't. Cause I'm like, it took me forever to learn how to spell it. When I was younger, it was like not a fun time, but now it's easy. So now it's Scobie. You can it's either two ways to get it wrong, right? It's either you call me Scooby or Scobie. You get it right or you get it wrong. It's not multiple like before. So but yes, like Lee mentioned, I started my podcast called Live Well Bipolar almost 4 years ago. So it was, yeah, January 31st of 2020. So I started that podcast. And if you are have been following me or the OG listeners, you guys know back when I first launched the podcast, it was called Crooked Illness, and that is the name of my memoir, which when this episode is released, it'll be the official 2 year anniversary of when I launched my book. So October 6th of 2021 is when I launched that. And I basically give you guys an inside glimpse into what it looks like to not only live with bipolar disorder, but live with it from the perspective of someone going from being a patient in the hospital, hospitalized, court ordered treatment, SMI, severe mental illness diagnosis, to going back and working at that same exact hospital a few years later. So I was on both sides. So I get into the full story. I don't leave any details out. And yeah, so started with the podcast, then the book. And now, really, what I like to do is, like Lee said, have these conversations and bring people on the podcast who I'm going to be having Lee come on, which I'm so excited to get into his
Little
story.
home
But
and home. Little home and home, actually. Yes,
I
absolutely.
know,
I'm looking forward to it.
first
My
podcast.
first appearance, yes, somewhere else. So thank you for having me, taking the chance.
I know, I'm so excited. And yeah, that's just a little bit of history and background. But I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 19 years old, hospitalized. And I will get into the full story
Yeah,
wherever he wants to take us.
yeah. So you kind of you covered everything I was going to. Congratulations, first of all, on the book. I mean, I believe I won't say your age, but I believe I'm 9 years your senior, and so that means I've been thinking about writing a book for at least 15 years. So
Oh,
congratulations. It's
thank
amazing.
you.
I can't imagine how much work and effort and everything it took you to get to that point. So I want to get back to the podcast and the book. We'll finish there again. But I kind of want to start back a little bit more at the beginning. A couple recently, I've read or talked to multiple people and seen a little bit of research out there that people actually believe that bipolar could kick in much younger than the typical range that people say of that 16 to 25.
Mhm.
Now, whether it's bipolar setting in or something else, I know that I was quite different as a child. I had a lot of excess energy that wasn't normal of even kids that age, when I look back. So I'm curious for you, were there any signs even before the 16, 17, 18 that something could have been coming, if you will?
Yeah, I love that question because that's what I think is the most important thing to do is to start at the beginning. Like go back as early as you can remember. When did this first start to show any kind of form in your life? And I feel like definitely for me, I obviously was first diagnosed initially with depression at 16. And I wasn't diagnosed with bipolar 1 until 19. So you have that gap, right? So 16, then 17, 18, then 19. So what happened prior to that though? So what led up to this diagnosis of depression and then bipolar? So for me, what I found for myself, seeing the signs, to be honest with you, I didn't have any awareness into it because I had such a different mindset, lifestyle, things that I was consumed with and by at that point in my life, that all I could see is that. All I could see is that wall, the obstacles, the problems, that I wasn't even able to let myself think of a possibility of anything else. So really for me, what I think kind of set it off with the first experience of that depressive episode that I went through. So literally as early as 15, 16, 17, 18. And I didn't have my first manic episode until 19, when I was hospitalized in psychosis. Very like traumatic experience there. But I think for me, what really led to it was going through something that I talk about in the book, and I get into way more detail in the story, is going through sexual assault, going through rape at a young age, and then at 15, and then not knowing how to communicate that. And really, like, when I was communicating, it was being shut down, right? So being told, okay, that's your fault, like this is, and all the things we've heard some of it, right? And if people who do share their stories about that, like, you're being called a slut in the hallways at your school, and that's all the experiences that I had. So it was very challenging for me to even feel comfortable talking about my mental health, because I'm already hit with this, like, oh, this happened. And then I really internalized that. And to tell you the truth, I really believed that. I was like, okay, well, yeah, like, and then I started to tell myself the story of it really wasn't that big of a deal.
But I think that's fair. I think you're used to telling your story, and I mean, first of all, I'm so sorry that that happened. I can't. I mean, I think everything you're saying makes sense. The after effects and how, but like how are you supposed to know at 15 how to deal with that? Especially
Yeah.
if you're not given any leadership or any
Mhm.
direction in a healthy way of dealing with that. And
Mhm.
that's certainly one of those traumatic events that can very understandably lead to depression. And then if that's not taken care of, other things. So I want to stop because I think that alone is enough. But it sounds like with that and everything, you're just adding trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma.
Yeah, and really, I think that's an important point that you brought up, is how would you even know at 15 what, like, here's the steps, here's what to do. And I think for me too, like, on top of that, there was also just obviously a loss of a lot of friendships, a loss of a lot of trust in people that I thought were people who I could open up to, who I could like have a relationship, whether it's friendships, some family. So having, just feeling no support. So honestly, I went from being, and people would tell me this, and I remember like one day, like it was back in like high school, like one of the people that I was really close with was like, hey, like, like, it was like hard because she kind of called me out on it in front of like a bunch of people, like, you're not as outgoing anymore, you're not as like yourself, like, you're kind of, and she's like, you're kind of boring now. And I literally was like, I could feel like my stomach like drop, and I was just like, I literally remember just being like, oh, like I have to go. And like I went like to the library, and I was just like, obviously, like, probably, I think I was like in the bathroom just like crying, because it's like, yeah.
Well, you lost your childhood.
Yeah.
Life wasn't just go outside and have fun anymore. So again, it
Mhm.
makes total sense. I mean, you're
And I
grieving
think
childhood.
yeah, I think
Everybody
it goes
else.
back to, people just don't know how to, like, there's some people, and I didn't tell this to, I think people can only respond to what they give you, or what you're giving them and what they see. So this person is like, oh, you went from this to that. But I think the delivery, obviously, to say, oh, you're boring now, it's like, you know, people don't know how to go about it, right? Especially with suicide, and oh, this person, died by suicide. Like, I don't understand it. I don't get it. They seem so happy. It makes no sense. I think it's just the approach, because I remember, like, and this is something that I don't think I've talked about in many interviews, but I've struggled with self-harm and like thoughts of suicide. I have, like, in my book, I talk about my experience with that. And then, like, I have a trigger warning, because I tell people, like, I don't want you to, I talk about these things in the book. I get into my experience with that. So I don't want anyone to think this is coming when they're reading it. So I've had that experience, and I remember literally being called out again. And when it was back in high school, like I remember we were doing some project, we were coloring something, and I went to the back of the room to grab markers. And I remember like I had like some sweater or something, and my arm like went up, and I went to grab a marker, and this guy, one of the guys in the class, literally, and I just remember this, and he stops and he like sees my arm, and he's like, oh my gosh, and he's like, are you trying to kill yourself or something? And says that so loud in the class, like I felt it get so quiet. And then I just remember later that day, I was in a different class, but I remember like they're like, you need to go right now to the nurse's office. And I'm just like, oh, I fell down riding my bike. And I just think they were like, okay, well, it doesn't, I just don't think people know what to say or
No.
didn't know. So yeah.
And I give you credit for putting the trigger warning up, and I try to do the same thing. However, I also give you more credit for talking about it, because the only way it's like anything else, we need to normalize talking about suicide. We have to, especially as a society, because the only way to stop something is to talk about it, so that people, instead of saying in your instance, no, I'm fine, I fell off my bike. Yeah, but be able to know that, saying without somebody overreacting, immediately sending you to the hospital, and know that you're able to have a conversation about it, get the help you need. So again, one more thing I think is great of you to be willing to share so much of yourself in the hopes of helping others. But I mean, to go back to that, it sounds like you're just left on an island again, really alone again, without any direction on where to go.
Yeah, and I think going back to your point, so for me, I feel like I remember also like when I was younger, and there was also a thing too, like I had a lot of challenges with my relationship with my mom in particular. And I just remember like just there was a lot of stuff with that. And I remember, initially, like my parents were like, you have to go to therapy. We don't know what, but go. And I remember on me not taking it seriously and not feeling like I needed to be there. And because I feel like all the signs that I was shown is just move on, like forget it, cover it up, don't talk about it. So I feel like that's what I did when it comes down to like the suicidal thoughts I was having, like getting into like talking about self-harm, is I feel like there's a thing out there that's not true. Is I used to hear about this, oh, people who cut themselves, like they want attention, they want you to see it, and they want people to like look at them and like say and whatever they want, they don't get attention. And I feel like that for me is I never did that. I was like mortified when I remember being in that classroom, and the guy in the class being like, are you trying to kill yourself? And then when the nurse in the school was like looking at my arm, and she's like, okay, well, you fell off your bike. And then she's like, it doesn't really seem like from a bike, but she didn't do anything else. She's like, okay. And like, what are people? And that's the thing too, is that's why I remember being in the back of my car when my parents were taking me to therapy. And I just remember I heard my mom like whispering to my dad, like, did you see her arm? Like, did you see? But I feel like like people I feel like they want to help, they want to say something they don't know. And I feel like for me, I didn't have any tools on like how to communicate it. I didn't even really know. All I knew was it just kept getting darker and darker and like lonelier and scarier. And I'm like, I went through this like traumatic like sexual assault. Now I'm like, I don't feel like I have any friends. I feel like people don't like me because I'm not funny anymore, because I don't even know what to say. Like I've never had that experience where I get around people and I'm just like, I don't even know like I just didn't care. I'm like, I really just don't want to be here. And like, I feel like people and then obviously going through school and I told one friend actually what happened to me. And I remember it coming out and people being like, I remember there was a couple of girls. One of them was like, oh my gosh, like who'd you have sex with, or who'd you sleep with? And then I was like, what? Like, what are you talking? And then it was like, then all of a sudden I remember walking down the hallway one day and just hearing like, oh, like she's a slut, like whisper. And I literally, like, I was crying, like I was trying like so hard to like just keep walking. And I just remember like, because there was another guy in my high school who this kind of got around, and like I ran track, I ran cross country, I started to lose interest in doing that. And I remember like there was some dance coming up where it was like, I think a Sadie Hawkins dance where the guy asks like the girl to
Yeah.
the dance. And I didn't really, we were kind of like, I didn't really know him that well. We went on like one, I think it was like one date. And then I don't think I've ever talked about this in like an interview, but we went on one date. And for me, like this is right after like me, I feel like my go-to thing became like to use sex as something to help me forget about that like memory. So I'm like, I need to like just, it wasn't, I'm like, and I started to like tell myself it really wasn't that big of a deal. And it really wasn't like, you're just feeling like that. So I went and I had sex with this other person. And then initially, and like right away, like first date or whatever. And I feel like after that, we were supposed to go to this dance. And then I remember here, like I remember going to the track or cross country practice and hearing the other kids being like, oh, well, he's not going with you. Like, do you, cause they're like, yeah, like you just sleep with and I'm like, that's like not even true. And it again, like another hit to me, like feeling like now he's not talking to me. And then like years later, I think messaged me and was like, I'm so sorry for how I handled it. And I was like actively like really not doing well. And like, it just was like hit after hit. And I'm like, I'm surprised that, I don't know, it was really, like really bad.
Well, it's surprised you're still here. I mean, you're okay. It's okay if you say that. I mean, it's, you know, or wherever you were going with that, because I mean, like I said, that there's one trauma after trauma after trauma. And so I'm assuming, or I won't assume, I'll ask, but I do want to head back to one thing before I ask what I was about to,
Mhm.
because I think it's important. You said people assume you want to kill yourself, you want to hurt yourself. Or you
Yeah.
want attention, which was really the point that I wanted to go back to and drive home.
Mhm.
People don't, in my experience, and I was suicidal for 20 years. I mean, for at least, it was at least 20 years. I mean, and 15 to 20. And it was never, I want to kill myself. It was not a selfish thought. And if I ever did talk about it, it was the last thing I ever wanted to talk about. The only time I self-harm were the two times, and other times that I wanted to, but I felt nothing.
Mhm.
I felt zero, nothing. I had no feelings towards anything. And that was the only thing I could do, was to increase my pain level to feel anything. That's why
Mhm.
I did it. It wasn't attention. And like you said, I hid it and lied forever. I played basketball the week later, and like you, I said, nope, somebody had long fingernails and scratched me. And they were like, holy
Mhm.
crap, I know. Unreal, right? Same thing. You don't tell me. I lied about it for 10 years.
Mhm.
I told people different things about that for 10 more years too. Was that the similar reason why you did it, or what was the reason you did self-harm? Because I think that's a question a lot of people would be interested in.
Yeah. So for me, literally hearing you describe that sounds like literally my same experience because I remember that I never wanted at all. I just felt like it was like so out of control and like losing so much connection with just being able to self-regulate. I had no control on how to like process my emotions, handle everything because I feel like every cry for help that I try to communicate, it was like, it wasn't that bad. Like this happened to you. Okay, whatever. Well, look at how you dress. Look at how you act. Like it was me. And I'm like, I'm the problem. So I just felt like, again, like I couldn't really, again, same thing. Like it was very hard to like even talk about it. And I feel like the same way with suicide, like with my experience with it, with like my story with that, I felt the same way. I wasn't trying to, I didn't want to die, or I just wanted whatever I was feeling to like be gone. And it wasn't, I feel like people, when they say, oh, it's selfish, like this person tried to commit suicide or did this, or, whatever the word is, or killed themselves, or whatever you want to phrase it, have very little understanding. And I used to think it was such a like bad thing that I understood it. Now I see it as such a blessing to have it like on my level. I know what my experience was with it. And now, like, and you hear this from every person you're able to have a conversation with who talks about, I attempted suicide and this is why. It wasn't because I hate my family. I want to leave behind my family. It wasn't this. It was, you are in so much pain. You are in like, it's so unbearable, and you want that to stop, and you feel hopeless, you feel helpless, and you're literally drowning. You cannot get out, and you
The only
become,
way out. It's the only way out.
it's the only, you
The only
start to
way
see
out.
that.
It's the
And
only
that's
way.
exactly why I did it. And it wasn't for attention. Like I never thought, ooh, if I oh, if I'm going to cut myself and like, maybe someone will see it. I was like, I would hide it too. Like I would hide it all the time. And when anyone would, I would literally be like, I would just be like, yeah, like I have this, a dog scratched me, or like I fell down, and like it was just like I always get hurt. And even if someone actually directly said to me, "Are you actually want to?" I didn't even think about that. Like, do I actually want to die? I just want, and like the same thing that you're saying, physically being able to feel
Yeah.
any of those things. So that was really my experience with it, for sure.
Yeah, you just want to be out of the moment. And to be clear, when I say it's the only way out, I was dead wrong about that. I just want to make sure that nobody hears that the wrong way when I say it's the only way out. It wasn't. It was but that's what it felt like in the moment. So thank you for going there with me. I appreciate that, because that kind of bravery and willingness to talk about it is, again, the only way that we're going to help other people feel comfortable asking for help in the future. It's like, hey, we were there, we totally understand. And I know I still have my moment from time to time where it's like, I'm still there. We just know how to get out of it better, quicker, and there's always hope. That's always kind of the message I want to send. Is like, there is hope. Even if there's no
Yes.
moment, there's hope. So let's get back to your story here. So you trauma after trauma after trauma. It sounds like starting at about 15. I think we're in kind of your later teenage, high school years. So when, I guess, obviously the depression is self-explanatory from where that came from, hearing what you, that's just incredible in a bad way,
Mhm.
with what you went through. When did it kind of start to flip and ramp up then? Because obviously you said you were diagnosed bipolar 1 and mania and hospitalization. How did that process start then?
Yeah, so for me, it really started with, so yeah, we covered my experiences from 15, 16, 17, 18, and then the diagnosis is at 19. So for me, what started to happen is I remember, like, this was right after high school, right? So I was in community college, I was working 2 jobs. I was a cashier and I worked in room service. So I would get up at like 5 in the morning, go work in room service. And I would go, like, sometimes I work double shifts, like all this stuff. And I just started to notice a shift because I was previously, like you said, diagnosed with depression. And I remember having a gap when I was seeing a therapist, and then he's like, you don't need to be here anymore, because you're doing, look at how well you're doing. You're getting such good grades in school and all these things. And then I didn't have a therapist or anything anymore. And then I remember I was on a lot of different medications. And I think what started to happen is I have a lot of them like written down in the book, and I talk about that. But I remember one experience that stuck out to me is it was around with the person that I was dating in high school. So what happened was, with my medication, I was just like, I don't think this is working. I don't think these medications are working. So I'm like, what? I'm just going to take like 4 of them. Like, maybe if I take more, it'll make something happen. So I remember taking like 4 of them or something like that. And I remember looking back on that, and it made me manic. So as soon as I remember literally getting my phone and texting my then boyfriend, that in high school, and this whole rant of like, all, and like we were obviously having like a lot of problems, and I didn't know how to communicate in relationships. I didn't know any of that. So I just was like, I feel like this, and I always do this for you, and I feel like blah blah, like you're a terrible person, like just such terrible things, like not even trying to resolve. And I remember waking up the next day and just seeing, like, I was like, I sent all of this, and it was almost like a blackout in a way of just rage, like manic rage.
Yeah.
And I remember him being, because we've had a lot of fights too, and he was like, he's never done this, but he was like, yeah, I think you're right, like we shouldn't be together. And I was like, no, like I didn't. And he's like, look at what you said. And I remember, so we weren't together, and I remember one of my best friends in high school, who we're no longer friends now, but she ended up calling him, and I was in the room and I was just listening, and I'm like, can you just like talk to him and ask him? So she calls him, and she's like, hey, like, would you ever, what's going on with Paris? Like, what's going on with your guys' relationship? Or would you ever want to like try to fix things? And I remember literally he said this, and it was like, he's like, well, the truth about her is he's like, she's just so easy to get. Like she just gives herself away and like it doesn't like matter. Like he's like, what do you mean? Like she just does that. She'll just go out and like sleep with whoever, and she's probably already doing that now, and she doesn't really. And then I remember hearing that and I was so mad, but it was like now I'm like, that's true. Like he was saying, but it was hard to see it because that was my coping mechanism. Like after that, I was like, I just need to go out. I need to party. I need to drink. I need to like meet people. And I thought that was my way of running this facade that everything's fine, nothing's going on with me. And that was like really, really hard. But that's when the manic experience started, is taking all, because there's certain medications too. You guys probably know this if you've been misdiagnosed, like I have, with depression, that if you give somebody who has a bipolar diagnosis, it can make them manic. And that's what my experience was. So I remember I would tell this, and I went back to
Be on
a
antidepressants.
psychiatrist. Yeah, and I would tell this to my doctor. I'd be like, look, like this isn't normal. I'm like, I'm working 2 jobs. I'm getting good grades, but I have so much energy. I can't slow down. My thoughts are like racing. And I feel like he was like, on paper, you look fine. So this makes no sense. And he kind of like dismissed me. And I was just like, that's when I was like, no one believes me. Even if I came out and said, I'm going to go kill myself, no one would believe me. Because I kept, every time I would try to advocate for myself, it was like, no, like you don't have a problem because this.
Wow, I cannot imagine how difficult that had to be throughout that time for you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I just can't imagine. I mean, I was the opposite. I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna keep drinking and gambling the rest of my life and it'll just end at some point. But like you were trying to get the help. So were you on antidepressants at the time? Is that what that's what okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so I was curious about that. I had one other question in there, but you say so many good things that I forget by the end. So no worries. So I'll let you keep going, and if I remember it, we'll just kind of so the antidepressants didn't work. So what then led to the hospitalization?
Yeah. So for the hospitalization, it was December of 2014. So almost 10 years ago. And it was right before Christmas. So I have it in, I have the date in my book. I believe it was like the second week of December, but I remember coming home, it was January 5th. But what led up to that was, so obviously I told you about like the antidepressants, the whole fight, breakup. Now I'm not with the boyfriend, I'm single, I'm going out, drinking, partying, like, and at that point I had never tried drugs until like getting introduced to these just people who aren't good for you. So like being like, oh, you should try, oh, let's try cocaine, or let's try ecstasy or Molly or whatever. And I didn't do this, I didn't do drugs regularly, but I would do it on, if it was around or whatever. And I never had any. I remember doing that and being like, all these people talk about cocaine and how much fun it is. It doesn't do anything for me. I have no, so I'm like, I don't even want to do it anymore. And I remember also what led up to the hospitalization was me continuing to put myself in such unsafe situations. And you guys, I had so much hesitation about talking about this, about sharing, like, oh, like coming out and telling people, oh, I had suicidal thoughts. I went through sexual assault. I used to self-harm. Like, because I'm like, how is that going to make me look? How am I going to look? And I don't care how I look because there's so many people who have that. I want to tell you, like, I was in so many bad, yeah.
First of all, I'm going to stop you there because I don't care how you think it makes you look. I'm going to tell you it makes you look strong, brave, courageous. I mean, willing to help others. Like you said, putting yourself out there and putting things out there that some people aren't going to like. So
Mhm.
I know the same things. I know those same thoughts. So I'll just be the other person on this side telling you absolutely not. Because and if people don't, if that's all people want to see and they don't want to hear them read the rest of the story, they can think the same thing about me right
Mhm.
now. I mean, if my girlfriend wasn't, and we'll get to them later, but if my girlfriend wasn't the type of person who could hear stories and realize it's not the same person, we wouldn't be together.
Mhm.
What people have to understand is before medication, you're not the same person. It's you're in there. I was in there. My good moments was when it came out, but the rest of the time is when the bipolar was under control. it absolutely was under control. If I stopped my medication now, those thoughts would come back in 36 hours. I know it because I've forgotten my medication. They come back in 36 hours. So what I wanted to go back to, and this is I think a good time to get, I finally remembered, is you are so high masking, it sounds like. And so, like you had so much experience in high masking, from the sexual assault to the depression, to why you were self-harming, to and I mean, somehow I got a degree as well, but to having 2 jobs, to having all A's. I mean, all of that is a form of extremely high self-masking, in my opinion. So but at the same time, that had to lead up to just massive frustration of like, now I'm not masking anymore. I'm trying to be this wreck. Why isn't anybody helping?
Yeah. And what I think that's the thing too is literally the day that I was hospitalized, I can tell you. So I remember going to, and this is when I started, I was still with the same psychiatrist. And I remember literally going in the office and again, saying this, what's going on, and just not being heard. And it's like, what do I need to do? Do I just need to like fall on the ground and like to have you take me somewhere? So I just was so frustrated. And another thing, because the psychiatrist that I used to see, I don't think it was also appropriate, but I know I went to school, like elementary school with his daughters and stuff. And he would tell me, he's like, oh, well, maybe if, your dad bought you a car or something, it would help. Like, cause I feel like I would also go into these appointments and I would just complain. And like, here's all the problems. But then it was like, and then I would hear him and I would try to also, a little bit of it was on me, because I would try to manipulate my psychiatrist and therapist to tell me things like this so I could take it back. Yeah.
But either way, that's not really appropriate. So
Yeah. So see, that was so I remember the day that
yeah.
I was hospitalized, going into this appointment, and I just stormed out. I just remember like I left, and my dad was like, because my dad took me, and he was down in the waiting room. And then I remember that the psychiatrist called the police and had them like escort me back up there. And I just this is how I know how out of control like I got, because the cops were like they were like, here, we're taking you back up there. And I was like, oh, like, what are you trying to handcuff me for? Like, are you trying to take me in your car and like have sex with me or something? Like, what? And it was just because that's all I saw. I completely lost value in myself, because I feel like when you have such an abusive relationship, and then I had a lot of abusive relationships after that I can talk a little bit about the damage that did for me and my future relationships. So to say that, like, you already know, like, as if I was a police officer and someone said that to me, and be like, what's like, something's going on with this person to say that.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, let's use that actually as a reason for people to go buy your book. Let's remind them, because we only have an hour or so, and I would love to, I would go even more, but somehow we're already over a half an hour in, which it's because you're fascinating and I appreciate you sharing all of this personal detail with us. So let's kind of stick with, as far as the hospitalization goes. So how did they end up, the police, they call the police officer, that's how you ended up staying at the hospital? And then how did the process go there? No.
So I'll tell you. So basically, so that was the morning. That was in the morning. So appointment, police came, brought me back to the appointment. I ended up going back home after that. I sat through the appointment, went back home. And then I remember the psychiatrist gave my dad a list of providers or something. And I remember, so I just went on about my day, which I don't even know, like, that's the thing too, is when you start to enter into psychosis. I've only had that experience once, so I can't speak to it too much, but there is things that I talk about in the book that I completely remember. Like, I remember later in that day, there was a Christmas party that night. So I had a Christmas party that night, and I was like, I'm going to go out, and I'm going to go. And I remember going to get my nails done, and just like, there was an outdoor mall that I used to live at. So I remember, like, I just remember being in that store and pacing. Like, I remember getting out my phone and just being like, I couldn't like stop crying. And I'm on the phone with my dad, like I'm like, how come no, like, just back and forth, like, just issues with my mom, issues with all the stuff in my past. And I'm in public, like, doing this, and people are they're like doing their holiday shopping. They're probably like, I have no idea what thoughts are going through people's minds, but I can tell you not one person stopped me, and no one was like, are you okay? What's going on? And I feel like I just didn't care where I was. I'm like, I was like this. And I remember I ended up calling the police that day. They said 9 times. And I didn't, so me being pretty naive, I did not realize that there was a non-emergency line. So I kept calling 911 like over and over and over and over. And I'm like pacing and I'm like, I need someone to come. And like, I remember I was outside walking around on my phone and there was a police car. And I thought that, I'm like, oh my gosh, are you here for me? And I'm like knocking, banging on the window. And the cop was like, never do that again. Never approach our vehicle. Like, don't do this. And again, it's me trying to like, clearly like in distress, clearly like something is going on. And this, again, like another person, don't do that again. They drive away. So it's like I just felt like every attempt that I made to get like taken like something and then I remember how I finally ended up going to the hospital is I just later that night I went to the holiday party, and I just remember like there was a girl that had come there that I introduced one of my friends to, and I feel like I just had like, because this was one of the girls that I thought, this is my issue, is I feel like I had a lot of friends who I thought were like my friends and real and there for me, and then I find out behind my back they're saying, oh, she's a slut, oh, all these things. And I like found out about this, and then she's at the party, and I went up to her and I was like, I just was like confronting her. And I remember my friend, like she had her dog and I was holding her dog and I'm like yelling at this other girl and I like throw the dog on the ground. I'm like, well, I'm like, fuck you guys, fuck everyone. And I just like, and I'm like drunk, right? I think I am. I'm not 100% certain, but I definitely drank a lot at this time in my life. I would drink, like 4 or 5 times a week, and I wouldn't get drunk every single time, but I would just drink a lot. So I remember getting in my car. I should not have been driving. I don't know how anyone let me leave, but I stormed out of there. And I lived like 2 minutes away. So I got home and I remember getting out of my car, going to the house and like storming in the house. And I remember, I can't exactly remember how the situation happened, but I remember my dad was trying to show me like, here's this paper the doctor gave me, like we can go. And I just took it and ripped it up. And I'm like, no one fucking cares. None of you care and like pay attention to me. Like something's like clear, nothing's enough. Like all these, look at everything I did this whole day. Not like no one takes it seriously. So I remember like going into the bathroom and I don't know, again, calling 911 over and over and over again. And finally the police came to my parents' house and they looked at, I remember they told me later, they said, do you realize we could take her to jail right now because she's been abusing the system by calling over and over and over again this number. And I said, I've been calling over and over again this number. And I remember I was completely like in psychosis, not even here anymore. Cause I started to think that like, I started to think that my parents, I told the police, I'm like, my dad's trying to like kidnap and do all like and it was this whole like thing that I thought was real. And they told my parents, they said, we are going to take her to go be evaluated. And that's when I got taken to urgent psychiatric center and then the hospital.
Gotcha. Wow. So essentially you called yourself
Mm-hmm.
the most roundabout way I've ever heard.
Yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. I cannot believe it took that. Well, but so now that sounds like that was the start to the next part of the story though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was the thing. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks and I ended up coming back home after that. And I was so terrified. I had a very bad experience in the hospital. I don't want to ruin and spoil too much. I talk about it in the book. I talk
Yeah.
about what traumas have happened to me in that hospital that I don't speak about.
So yeah. So save that. But I am curious. So was it during those 2 weeks that you got your bipolar diagnosis?
Yes.
It was. Okay. So if you don't mind, so save the juicy parts. I hate to say it that part, but I mean, hey, people like to read terrible things. I don't know
Yes.
why, but we're gonna, you benefit off it, I hope. A little bit. But we have to laugh about it. If I don't laugh, I'm gonna cry every single day of my life. So I have to laugh, and look back at it that way. But how did the diagnosis process go? And then obviously I'm not trying to play down how terrified you were and what those next steps look like, because I know for me, it was just, and for most people I've talked to, getting that diagnosis is two things: relief and absolute abject fear of what the future looks like.
Mhm. Yeah, so I felt those exact two things. So for me, I can tell you honestly, I talk about it in the book, but there's a lot that I just don't have memory of. I share what I do about the process, but what I remember clearly is coming home. I had my diagnosis, but I still didn't make a lot of changes. I still didn't do the work. So that was 22 years old. So I told you guys, like, starting from 15, you know about that, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 diagnosis. And then I was home at 19, but I started working at the hospital when I was 22. So there's that time period. So 19, 20, 21, 22. So what happened in those 4 years? So I got my diagnosis. I was on court ordered treatment, which means, what does that mean? So basically it means I was hospitalized. I was put in front of a judge and determined. They have different classifications of, if you're, I think it's persistently acutely disabled, a danger to others. They classify different things. So my diagnosis, bipolar 1, SMI, which stands for severely mentally ill, and they had me taken to a clinic. So I was supposed to go to this clinic and get my blood labs checked. I think it was like, I forgot how often it was, but it was for a year. So they would have you go in every month. I think it was every week or 2 weeks. Then it was like once a month. They take your levels. I had medication that I had to take. I had to be monitored. And this is the thing, I will tell you, that was helpful because I needed to essentially, I think, have that happen to me, because I wasn't going to take it. I wasn't going to like listen, but I am such a, I'm like both a rule breaker and a rule follower in the sense, but like when it comes to like school and stuff like this, I'm a rule follower. But like other things, I'll like break the rules, but like stuff like that, I will like, I need to be here at this appointment. I'll show up on time. I'll take my medicine, whatever. But I did not make any other changes to my life besides that, which was destructive, because when you look at it, how was I living my life? When I came home from the hospital, what was I doing? I was still going out partying. I was still drinking every weekend. I was still matching with whoever I was meeting on Tinder, like whatever guys I'm meeting at whatever club, going and sleeping with whoever, and then having these relationships with these men who clearly, like, I'm not being taken seriously. I was in an abusive relationship that wasn't like an official relationship, but it was someone who was much older than me, who kind of got me to believe that this is what love is. And it kind of ingrained in me, normalized that, I need to be with more than just you. I need to be with these other women. And then kind of got me to think that that's what I needed. I need to do that as well to accept love. So I kind of just, it was so twisted, and I would carry those patterns into other relationships. And what really helped me, like you're saying, like obviously coming out of the hospital, so 19 years old, I was still like that at 19, still like that at 20, still like that at 21, still like that at 22. And I graduated college at 22. And then that's when I still was not really doing anything that much different. But I ended up coming home. And one thing that I was always good at, I was always really good at school and studying and work and like being a hard worker. I never had issues with that. So I had a bunch of job interviews, and I remember I was actually offered a position at the same hospital where I was a patient at. And I was like, I'm not going to do that, because what if they recognize me? What if they remember me? All these fears. And I feel like the universe, like, it does things in a way. And I feel like I ended up going back and working there, but still, I can tell you, I still was not comfortable talking about, oh, I have a diagnosis of bipolar. I still was
Right.
hiding from
I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry, I was just agreeing, but no, that makes, yeah. I mean, that I just keep going back to, what were you supposed to do and how were you supposed to know? I mean, you
it.
had so many terrible influences, for lack of a better word, time and time and time again. And don't feel bad. I spent 18 months after my diagnosis drinking and gambling every dollar I had, and every 4 nights. The only difference is I didn't quite want to kill myself. That's what medication did for me for 18 months. So that makes total sense. So what was it then that, two things? What was the last straw, or what was the person, or what was the thing that made you kind of start taking accountability? And then what did that look like? What did successful living? I mean, I'm guessing without alcohol, but what else? You know, what else would kind of led you to that recovery process and the amazing really person and places and things that you're doing now today?
Yeah, so I can honestly tell you, like, I really started to do the work on myself at 23 years old. And that's actually coincidence when I first met my husband, who I'm now married to. So I remember this is like, like when I first met him, that's when I first was very new into like making these changes. And I just started to get awareness into, because I just had gotten out of a previous relationship that was very toxic. And it started to bring out the patterns that I was seeing. I was like, I'm either going to continue to be this person. And that's when I started to see it, that I've learned destructive behaviors from being treated really, really badly and abused in relationships, but I'm taking that with me and like internalizing it, and I'm taking it into other relationships. So I was like, I'm done. I'm going to be single. I'm not going to do, I'm just, and I was like, honestly, and that's, I don't know how exactly I remember there was a conference that I was invited to from some friends that I went to high school with. And this is, I've never known what personal development is. I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know anything. So they said, hey, there's extra ticket. Do you want to come? And I was like, okay, like sure. And I remember going there and making up excuses that I can't stay the whole time because I have some appointment. When I didn't, I just didn't want to stay all day. And I ended up staying. And I remember seeing people getting up on stage and sharing their stories and saying, I went from being homeless, addicted to drugs, mental illness. And I was like sitting there listening to this. And I'm like, okay, I was like, this is like interesting, because it came down to changing my environment. I've only ever been around people who told me, you don't mean anything, you're just pretty, people just like you because you're pretty, like, and it was just like, it's just like shitty things to be told. And I that's all I thought was real. So I had very bad mindset. I didn't think, I would walk into rooms and I would think everyone in this room is talking shit. They don't like me. They want me to fail. And it was like all a story I made up because of the traumas that I internalized. So this conference was my first step to seeing people speaking about this. And I was like, okay. And one of the guys had a book, and I think it was like, I remember I was like, that's when I started to get into reading. Because I used to read a lot. I used to run a lot, and I started getting into podcasts. So I started listening to podcasts. I started reading a lot of books. And then I remember I first met my husband, and I was just like, right. I remember thinking like instantly, no. I was like, he is way too good of a person, too good of a guy. Like I can't tell him. And I'm like, and I remember like actually the first conversation we had where I opened up to him and I said, look, like I have a diagnosis of bipolar, and I'm like crying at the sushi restaurant. And because he would tell me, he's like, you're very surface level. And he would go back to his friends when he first started dating me. He's like, he would tell his friends like, dude, this girl is nuts. Like out of like, I don't even understand. Like we go on dates, she's all over the place. She's like over here, over here, over here, over here. She's very like surface level, talking about all this crazy stuff that she's done. And I don't even, and then I remember he told me this. He's like, one of my friends was like, dude, just keep going out with her. She's hot. Like maybe, whatever. And I'm like, that's what he said. So then I remember telling him, and he actually told me, I was so scared. I was thinking, I'm like, I'm going to tell him that I have a bipolar diagnosis, and he's never going to want to talk to me again. Because I had people use it against me a lot and be like, make fun of me for it almost. So I told him that. And he was like, I remember him being like, thank you so much for telling me this. Like, I'm finally able to understand and like get to know. And I was like, what? But I still continue to try to sabotage it in the beginning. I was like, no, like, because I was so used to unhealthy relationships where I was constantly fighting, arguing, all of this. So I would be like, why aren't you angry at me? Like, why aren't you like, I just, because it was foreign to me to have a healthy, loving relationship. And that's when I started to do the work and setting boundaries. I cut out a lot of people in my life. I cut out just, and I didn't do that before. I didn't know how to. I didn't want to. I didn't want to say no to people. I didn't want to be seen as boring or I'm lame because I don't want to go out and get drunk every weekend. So I don't care anymore. I'm like, I have no issue telling people I'm not drinking tonight. And like, that's the thing is I'm not 100% like never like sober, never drinking again. This is the first year when I've actually gotten sober curious and thought of the potential of what if I were to go on this journey. So I've been drinking significantly less, and I'm just like going through it right now. I'm talking to a lot of friends about their experiences. So, I don't want to come out here and say, oh, I never drink again or all this stuff. Cause I have, I'll have a drink, whatever, one drink, but it's not like I drinked. I want to get drunk,
Well, I think we
So,
found our topic for your podcast. Um,
mhm.
because I went from, I mean, I'm not kidding, I could drink half a 175 of vodka in a night. I would buy 175 every 2 days. And I have had one drink this year, I think, maybe two, like the whole year. So, and it was a slow progression, and yeah, it's fantastic for me. It's not for everybody, but we could talk about that more on yours. So, I before I get to your husband, because I want to get more into what the relationship looks like and how you guys have made that work, living with bipolar and everything else, on that. But I want to kind of go back to one thing that caught my attention at the beginning and has now made me kind of think continuously through. I truly believe bipolar is more of a spectrum over 1 and 2.
Mhm.
I know that I've gone through features of mania and short bursts of paranoia and whatever else. I'm almost positive it's due to drugs. And drinking. It really only happened when I was on 3 pills of Adderall in a 12-hour period and my, I don't know, 25th captain in diet at the time. And it sounds like yours was really that one time and was also probably induced by some drugs. And
Mhm.
but my follow-up to that then is, do you experience more depression? Because that's where it sounded like it started with. Since then, have you experienced more depression and more of the traditional bipolar 2 type symptoms? And
No, so I like to answer your question. I experience more of the manic side.
okay,
So to answer your question, so when I first was ever diagnosed with depression, it was 16. So from 16, 17, 18, and then right when I turned 19. So those 3 years was all just depression.
okay,
All just depression all of the time. And I didn't have any experience with mania until 19. So 19, and I've always had way more of that. I feel like for me, it's very situational now because I've cut back significantly on all the things that I used to. I don't have this, I don't go out, and I'm married now. I'm with my husband. We're in a relationship. I'm not out here trying to meet other guys, like go out or other guys, other women, whatever my situation is, right? But I feel like for me, I'm a lot more aware of my triggers. And I think to your point of, talking about like like the spectrum of bipolar, I definitely think that too, because I know for me being diagnosed with bipolar 1, and I have a sister who she's actually going to be coming on the podcast. I think her episode's out October 9th. She was diagnosed with bipolar 2. She has a lot more of the depression and then the mania. So that's her experience with it. And I feel like for me, I had an experience of like period of depression this year, but that was caused by a trigger and a big event that happened at a previous company, like place that I was working at, that memories were starting to resurface about me going through my sexual assault because of a bunch of sexual harassment that's been happening like to multiple people. And it just kept hearing it, and then different things being said to me that I felt just, I haven't had a period of depression like that in a very long time. So I actually ended up going back to therapy because of it. And it was April of this year. So I took a break from my therapist for a little bit because I was getting, like I said, getting married, all this stuff. Like I'll make an appointment, if I need to. So I went back, worked, and I said, look, like I'm coming back because I'm noticing these things. I'm not able to eat. I can't stop crying. And this is scary to me. It's scary to me because my husband's sitting there, we're like trying to have dinner and he's trying to talk to me. And I'm just like, I'm not hungry. I can't eat. Like, I'm just like, my mind is getting plagued by this. So I was able to work past that. But I feel like for me, like, I'm so aware now of my triggers. Like, I know how it shows up. Like, I know for me, like, and how I'm so proud of myself now for how I handle things. Like, I had, like, conflict or something, like I'll address it head on and like I'll do it. And before, I would be very quick. I wanted to fight. I wanted to argue. I loved that. And now I don't. I'm almost like the complete opposite. I don't want that. But also, I'm not going to sit there and like sacrifice my mental health to let people abuse me, walk all over me. I'm going to set a boundary and say, look, like I'm not, and just saying no to things and like having the respect as well. So for me, it's, I feel like now I still take my medication. That's a big part of it for me. Like I know everyone has a different opinion on that. There's some people who don't take meds, there's some people who do. Like whatever works for you works for you. I'm not going to tell you what to do otherwise or copy what I'm doing, but this is what works for me. Taking my medication, my therapy, my routine. I track all my habits. My sleep is way better. I know we were talking about this last month. I had a lot of issues with that because I would stay up till 4. I would stay up till it was like 4 a.m., 2 a.m., like all kinds of crap. But now I go to bed like every day around like 10:30, and sometimes it can be midnight, you know, on some nights. But I don't like sit there and beat myself up. Like I'm going to bed so late. Like I just get like, and I don't even set alarms anymore, even with like, you know, work and stuff. Cause I just naturally get up at like 7 and stuff. Like, but I had to work for that. I had to work to get like a routine like that. I had to completely redo my diet. I had to completely redo, I cut out soda. I cut out like a lot of things that I used to eat and drink. I drink a lot of water now. I track my water intake every single day. I exercise a lot more. I read, I listen to podcasts. My life is so different. And I feel like that is, and I'm always going to have days still where I sit there and I catch myself, you know, feeling a certain way and it's never going to be done. I feel like some people have told me where they like, I've had people say this where they're like, wow, like, you know, you're doing so well and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, but I have to maintain it. It's
You
never
can't
gonna,
take a day off. I can't take
yeah.
a day off of being bipolar. And
Mhm.
I'll even have loved ones who will say, well, you have to just take the day off. And it's like, I
Yeah.
know, but the problem is if I take the day off and let's say I sit on the couch all day long and I watch a movie, I'm probably going to wake up depressed tomorrow because I
Mhm.
need to keep it even.
Yeah.
I have to try and, so that, first of all, going back just a touch, thank you for clarifying that up. I think that was an extraordinarily, you went quickly over it. So you might have, that was an extraordinarily important clarification you made about the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 that I have even forgotten, honestly, because mine is so depression focused. It always has
Yeah.
been. It is just the overwhelming and overbearing side of the bipolar for me is the depression. So I forget that for some people, it's more the triggers. No, I got to watch out for the hypomania and the mania and everything. So I thank you for really clearly discerning that with your kind of comparison of you and your sister. I think it drove it home for me. I'm sure it will for everybody else as well. So,
Yeah.
all right, it's coming up on an hour, which is insane. I can't believe it's been that quick already. And I don't want to put one out that's an hour and a half. We probably lose people at that point. You haven't lost me, and you won't. But so you just did such a great job of covering what helps you.
Mhm.
You know, and sorry, that's so important for other people to understand too. Is it's those same things for so many of us: diet, water, support, simple lifestyle, reading, listening to podcasts. I I'm laughing and I was smiling throughout you talking about that because it was just like check, check, check. Yep. So it's refreshing to me because but it will be for everybody else too, because as much as you don't want to, I didn't want to stop drinking. I didn't want to take accountability. I didn't want to learn more about bipolar. I didn't really want to do any of those things, which is why I didn't for so long. But you are another person, people don't have to listen to me, it works, and that's why we do it. And I love that you said that it's hard work. You have to make a hard decision every time, and bipolar makes it 10 times harder, 100 times harder, 1,000 times harder. My brain sometimes wants me to do horrible things, just terrible things. It's still today medicated doing all those things, and I still get those intrusive thoughts, and it's like I catch them immediately now. Like you were saying, you catch them, but it wasn't that way at first. It would
Mhm.
take days at first to catch myself and to make it better. So one last thing here, and then I want you to plug your book and your podcast. Anything else that you want to finish up on? It is your show. But I because it one more thing you said is you started that process when you met your now husband, correct?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And so approached that opposite. I told my girlfriend the third time, and people can go watch that one. So I'm not going to get any further into that. I did my first episode with her. The third time we hung out, I told her I live with bipolar because I didn't know what the hell was going to happen. I blacked out the next week, I think, for the last time drinking. And then I finally started, was like, I can't do this shit anymore if this is ever going to have a chance. Our communication since I first told her, and her making me feel comfortable enough to be myself and honest about my horrible feelings and those horrible things that I wanted to do that I would never do, but verbalizing them made me feel less bad about it because she would then understand and know, and whatever else. Just talk about a little bit about the communication, what he does for you, how you two go about, because you're even further along than I am. But a handful of years, you're married. It's obviously been very successful to this point. It sounds like there's no reason for that. How do you guys make that work so well?
Yeah, so I think what really helps is just like the communication. So we've definitely had, so we've known each other for 5 years. We've been married now for almost 7 months. But when I first met him, like I mentioned, like that's when I first started getting back into doing the work. And I first launched my podcast. So I met him in 2018. I launched the podcast in 2020. So you see, like there was still 2 more years of doing the work before I did the podcast. But I think what's helped in our relationship is me being very honest with him and not holding secrets. I'm not going to hide things. I'm not going to hold things back. I'm not going to come around like, and I also respecting his boundaries because, to tell you guys the truth, when we first met, I didn't do that because I feel like I was so used to not having my boundaries respected in previous relationships that I still had to heal that part. So I remember like when we first met, like that was something that I had to work on. And I learned that because I started to sit there and be like, why am I doing this? Why am I trying to sabotage this and push him away when he's telling me like, I want to get to know you. I want to understand. And I'm like, no, like, and it's like, that's when I started to realize I need to cut this stuff out. For me, what helped me is literally getting a piece of paper and writing out all my problems. What are all my problems right now? What are all my issues? Whether it's you're sitting there and this person hates me or I hate this person, like get it on paper, write it out, get it out of your head. So I did all that. And then I started to focus on the things that I can control instead of all these things that I can't. So why am I spending so much time sitting here going back to, oh, this happened, and obviously address it and with the person. So I feel like for me, learning to communicate with him and also understanding his boundaries, what's important to him, what support he needs in a relationship, because he's seen me in the 5 years that we've been together. We moved in at the start of COVID. Like when we first met, he had his own house and I was living with my parents. Then I moved out of my parents into my own apartment. So I lived in my own apartment for a year. Then me and him moved in together. So we moved in together. This is right when COVID, and he has seen me through. And that's like, I feel like that's the test of a big relationship. If you can make it through COVID and you're like a new relationship and then you throw bipolar in there, you are set for a good success if you can make that work. So we went through that. So we started like, again, drinking a lot during COVID, a lot. And then he's seen me get, like just like yell and get really upset and all this stuff. And it was circled around the drinking. So I'm like, I'm going to cut this out. I don't want to treat you bad. I don't want to be rude when no one deserves that. And it's that me with alcohol. So I cut that back significantly. And then I think another thing is just, telling him when I need support, going to him and saying like, hey, I'm struggling with this right now, or this is really bothering me, whether it's like in our relationship or in my friendship, family, whatever, my medicine, like whatever, my diagnosis, whatever it is, telling him that, because he's such a good resource to have that dialogue with. But yeah, it really comes down to, for you, deciding if this relationship is a person that you see a lifelong partnership with, a future with, whether or not you want a family together, really being able to take it seriously and not just let that person walk all over you and treat you badly, but also don't do the same to them.
Yeah, I think the temptation could be you could use your illness as an excuse to get away with more. And I really do. I could see that happening. but I could see it happening more the other way. We're getting more trampled on, and so understanding. I love that you keep saying boundaries. You understand your own boundaries and his boundaries. But for me, it's just the communication side of it. I find that the more she knows, the more she can understand, because it's got to be. I don't know for you, so I don't want to put any. But for my relationship, I know at times it's really got to be hard on her if don't want to talk to anybody for a whole day,
Mhm.
and it might not have zero to do with her. Could have absolutely nothing, but she's lumped in everybody.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so do you find that as well, essentially?
Yeah, so I feel like for me, it's more of like, because I feel like in our relationship, like I'm always the more outgoing one, the one who's like, let's go be social and do all these things. And like, I kind of like, and I remember it's just like understanding his boundaries and like, I remember one time, because I wasn't even like aware of it. So he told me one time, he's like, yeah, like, I know sometimes like you'll just go and schedule stuff and then tell me we have like, oh, we have a dinner this night, or we have this, or we have this, or we have this. And he's like, I really like, I didn't know, but it's like you kind of just do this without. And I was like, oh, okay. And that's because the old me would have been like upset and been like, oh, so you don't want to go and you're mad and you want to fight. Now I'm able to like hear him say that and say, okay, like I hear you. Like I could have done better at like communicating that and letting you know. And now I'll do that in the future. Or also just like understanding like for me, for him, I feel like I have both sides. Like I'm very extroverted and like I love to go out and like see people, but then I also want to be alone. Like this weekend, I'm very excited because I have nothing on Saturday and Sunday, nothing. I don't want to do anything. And I feel like him, like he's definitely way more introverted. So for me, it's like asking him, like I asked him, there's a birthday party that we're going to actually next weekend. And I said, hey, like, do you want to come with me? Like, I would love if you, and like, I asked him before and I say, like, there's a lot of people going. And he's like, okay, yeah. So, like, just like respecting each other like that. And he'll ask me and like just learning that, right? So, learning the other person's boundaries, what matters to them, and not just like, just doing whatever you want, but it's a team. You guys are a team. And for him to understand and make this an actual like successful relationship is me communicating to him. And like sometimes like to be honest, like I'll have a tone sometimes, and I don't know if it's because I'm Italian or what, or if it's the bipolar, but I'll have a certain when I say certain things,
Oh,
and he'll be like, why are you yelling and like upset? And I'm like, I'm not. And then I'll be like, okay, like I can kind of see where that comes, but yeah.
it could be both. Strongly believe it's both, honestly. I mean, because the same thing will happen to me, and I don't know if it's far back in the heritage, but I'll just say more for the bipolar for me. It's hard to. There's a reason they define it as emotions, energy, and there's so many ways that it can affect you. And if
Mhm.
you're hypomanic or if you're super angry and depressed, either way, I'll be at level 8, octave 9, and won't even know it. I'll be not yelling at, but talking loudly, talking agitated. All of a sudden, I'm really upset, and my girlfriend just looks at me like, "Hey, hey, we good?" It's like, "Oh, yeah, sorry. I should probably bring it," because you don't know. You don't always know. You're not always in control. So, all right, we need to leave some meat on the bone because A, you're gonna come back sometime, but B, I'm gonna be on yours.
Yes.
So, first of all, you're so incredibly intelligent and aware of yourself, and you've been through so much at such a young age. I'm so much older than you, and I'm jealous of where you're at in your life already. I wish I could go back. I feel like I could be so much further than I am now, but I mean that truthfully. The self-awareness that you have, the taking control of your life at 23 with that type of illness and everything that you've been through is inspiring. It's awesome in the literal sense of the word. People go look up awesome. It's awesome and inspiring. So finish with whatever you want to on your podcast, your book, plug everything away. And I will tell people it's tempting. I'll just say this, and I'm going to put myself out there. And fortunately, I think you'll allow me to do this. When I saw your page first, I think it was when you were on vacation on your longer honeymoon. And I was like, not sure I really want to follow somebody who's on a month-long honeymoon with bipolar disorder. I want you to know this. It's tempting for some people to that I could not have been more wrong. Not only is your content phenomenal, have I learned a lot, but in getting to know you, in being fortunate enough to message you, and the sincerity that you have, the caring, everything is just so, what's the word I'm looking for? Genuine. It's so damn genuine, and I want to thank you for that, because it's so cool to see everything that you're doing, how hard you've worked for everything you have, how much you've overcome to get to where you at, to be able to even to work hard to get to everything that you're accomplishing now. It's incredible. It's a thank you. So I had to say that. I thought it was funny. I was thinking about it earlier, and so I wanted to come clean and just say how wonderfully wrong I was, and just how beautiful of a person you are, and truly mean that. So
Oh,
the floor is yours. Take it away.
oh my gosh, Lee, thank you so much. And that's so funny that you say that, because I think, yeah, like I was married, got married in March, and then we bought and moved into our house in April. And then May and June we were gone for our honeymoon in Europe. We went to Italy, Greece, and Paris, and then we got back in July. So it just, this entire year has been wild. But I love how honest you are, and like not being afraid to admit that, because like, and like I love how we were able to connect, because I feel like that is, it's just so amazing, because I feel like that's the power of just the good that you can get from social media. So I cannot wait to tell your story on the podcast. So I'm actually going to be talking with you next week.
Yep.
And then this episode will be out on next Friday when my
Yep.
book is. So to tell you guys where we can connect. So the number one place that you can connect with me is on Instagram. It's Live Well Bipolar. And then you go there, and then you can follow me, message me, connect with me. And then I also have a link there, and that will take you to, there's an article about me where everything we got into in this episode is broken down there. I have my book, I have the podcast. You guys can listen wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, literally whatever you want. And then the book is on Amazon as well. And yeah, like you can definitely connect with me there. And I love it, because it makes me so happy to get messages from people. And just literally, that's how me and Lee met. I don't know. I have to probably go scroll up on who messaged who first. I don't
I
remember.
don't
Like,
remember. I was thinking about that too. I don't
I was
remember either,
like,
but that's the
who?
thing. It's organic. That's what I
Yes.
found about Instagram is especially our community. And I like to think that we, you started it well before I did, but tried to build our little communities on there. That's the best part. It's not about like people follow. It's like, no, 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 no. I know more people and talk to more people on Instagram than I ever will in person who live with bipolar. If I have a question, I have people I can ask. If I need support, I have people I could go to. And yes, reach out to either one of us, because both of us, I think, can genuinely just say we just love hearing from people and just get excited about that in general.
Well, yes. And thank you so much for, I love this conversation. And to tell you the truth, like there's a lot of things that we talked about here that I don't think I've ever shared on any podcast. And I've been on like 50 something, I've been on a lot of shows, and I don't think I've shared, like, there's certain stories that I love that you were able to like
Yeah,
help me get into, to really share that story. So yeah, I can't wait to continue the conversations, and I'm so excited.
absolutely. Well, we'll do it again. That's the good news. We'll do it again. I don't have any rules for mine, so if you tell me in a month you want to come back on, we'll have you back on in a month. That's the nice thing about mine. I have no rules. We just roll with it.
I love it. I
All right.
I love it. Oh my gosh, this is so much fun.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.